54 years. That's how long one number sat at the top of the record books, completely undisturbed. Not because no one tried to reach it, plenty did. Players who were dominant, celebrated, and built specifically around putting points on the board, they looked at that number, played their best basketball, and still came up short. The record had started to feel less like a target and more like a monument, something you acknowledge and walk away from. And then, a girl from a small city in Iowa decided she wasn't going to walk away. What Caitlin Clark did on February 22, 2024 wasn't just a statistical achievement. It was the kind of moment that cracks open a sport and lets everyone inside see it differently. The kind of moment people tell their kids about. But to understand why it hit the way it did, you need to go back much further than Iowa. You need to go back to a Louisiana gymnasium in 1970 when a player named Pete Maravich was doing things with a basketball that nobody had a name for yet. Because that's where this story actually starts, and what Clark finally finished. Pete Maravich was not a normal basketball player. That sentence barely covers it. When Maravich attended Louisiana State University from 1967 to 1970, he didn't just perform well, he produced numbers so extreme that the people watching him in real time weren't sure what to do with them. He averaged 44.2 points per game across his entire college career. Not in a single game, not in a single season, across the whole thing, every single game. The number he finished with, 3,667 career points, went to the top of the NCAA record books and stayed there, untouched, for more than 5 decades. Here's the part that makes it even more absurd. Maravich scored every single one of those points without the three-point line. It didn't exist in college basketball at the time. The three-point shot wasn't introduced to the NCAA until 1980, a full 10 years after Maravich graduated. So every bucket was earned from inside the arc or from the free throw line. 2 points at a time. Maximum efficiency. No shortcuts, no long-range bombs stretching the defense, just volume, will, and an unprecedented level of individual dominance. For most of the people alive today who follow college basketball, the Maravich record is something they've heard referenced without ever fully grasping what it cost him to build it. It's become background noise, a number people use to explain how significant something would have to be before it even enters the same conversation. And for 54 years, nothing did. But records that feel permanent have a way of revealing exactly how permanent they actually are when the right person comes along. Let's be honest about something. The reason Maravich's record survived as long as it did wasn't just about his talent, it was about the impossible combination of conditions required to threaten it. To chase down 3,667 career points, you need a lot of things to go right simultaneously. You need elite individual scoring ability, that's the obvious part, but you also need volume. You need to play across multiple full seasons without a significant injury. You need to be on a program that builds its offense around you, not just uses you well. You need coaches willing to let you shoot the difficult shots, and you need usage, possessions, touches, opportunities at a rate that sustains elite scoring over hundreds of games. That combination is extraordinarily rare. Plenty of players hit 1 or 2 of those boxes. A few check most of them. Nobody was checking all of them for long enough at a high enough level to make the record feel reachable, until analysts started running projections on a sophomore at the University of Iowa and realized the math was looking different for the first time in decades. Great scorers came and went. Some had the talent, some had the program. Most had one or the other taken away before they could build the kind of sustained volume the record required. It became a fixture, something referenced in hushed tones whenever someone had an exceptional scoring season, the ceiling that players tilted their head toward and quietly decided wasn't worth aiming at. The record wasn't just hard to break, it had been around long enough that the expectation of it being broken had quietly died. That's a different kind of untouchable, and it's the one Caitlin Clark walked into. There's a version of the Caitlin Clark story that gets told as a sudden arrival, a player who materialized from nowhere in 2021 and turned women's college basketball upside down almost immediately. That version is useful for headlines. It's not the real story. Clark grew up in West Des Moines, Iowa. She attended Dowling Catholic High School, where her coaches were watching her do things on a basketball court that had no real frame of reference, and not just the scoring. The passing, the court vision, the willingness to create opportunities for teammates in ways that elite scorers almost never bother to develop because their teams don't ask them to. Most players who can put up 35 points in a game are taught implicitly or explicitly that their job is to put up 35 points. Clark was doing that while also functioning as the engine of the entire offense. When recruiting season arrived, she had options. Major programs with dominant national recruiting brands and deep championship histories wanted her. She chose Iowa, and the reason she chose Iowa matters. Head coach Lisa Bluter offered something that bigger names on bigger stages didn't: the freedom to be exactly who she was on the court, the freedom to initiate offense from half court, the freedom to shoot from distances that most coaches would have eliminated from a player's repertoire the moment they arrived on campus. Bluter didn't recruit Clark to fit a system. She built the system around what Clark could do and then gave her room to do it. That choice, a player with options choosing the program that trusted her, is where the record really begins. Clark's freshman season was interrupted before it could fully develop. The COVID-19 pandemic ended the 2019-20 season abruptly, erasing the NCAA tournament along with months of potential games and momentum. The year that followed was played under restrictions that altered how every college athlete in the country trained, competed, and developed. Even in that fractured environment, her production stood out. By her sophomore season, the volume was beginning to register differently, not just as impressive individual play, but as pace. Actual statistical pace against Maravich's career total. Analysts covering college basketball started running projections. At her scoring rate across the number of games she was likely to play if her seasons remained healthy, the math was pointing somewhere real. The three-point line was the accelerant. Maravich built his record scoring 2 points at a time. Clark was attacking in threes, at a rate no women's college player had ever approached, and from distances that left defenders with a genuinely impossible choice. Guard her tight and she'd drive past you. Give her space and watch her release the ball from 35 feet with the quiet confidence of someone who has done this in empty gyms since she was 12 years old. Opponents figured this out quickly. By her sophomore year, Clark was the most targeted player in women's college basketball. Double teams, half-court traps, physicality that pushed the edges of what officials were calling. Defensive schemes designed specifically around her shooting range and her instinct to create off the dribble. She absorbed all of it, adjusted, and kept producing. Her junior year, 2022 to 2023, produced numbers that made the record feel not just reachable, but inevitable. Over 27 points per game, leading Iowa in assists alongside scoring, carrying the offense as its primary creator while also putting up numbers that would have been remarkable from a dedicated shot taker with no other responsibilities. By the time her senior season tipped off, every game was a countdown, and the sports world had noticed. February 22nd, 2024. Iowa versus Michigan. Carver Hawkeye Arena, Iowa City. Over 15,000 people inside the building, every one of them aware of exactly what the night could become. The number Clark needed to surpass was known down to the single point. The gap had been closing for weeks, game by game, in front of growing crowds and expanding media coverage. By tip-off, she needed a modest performance, modest by her standards, to finish it. But basketball doesn't follow a script, and the way the record arrived turned out to say everything about who Caitlin Clark actually is as a player. She came out running Iowa's offense the way she always does, not hunting the milestone, not forcing extra shots to accelerate the moment, The same rhythm, the same shot selection, the same willingness to make the pass when the defense collapsed and a teammate was open. Points came off the dribble, off screens, from deep, from the free throw line. The record was being chased the way Caitlin Clark plays basketball, as a byproduct of doing what she's always done, not as a departure from it. When the basket came, the one that pushed her career total past Maravich's 3,667, the arena didn't erupt immediately. There was a pause. Not a long one, but a real one. The kind of involuntary stillness that happens when 15,000 people need a second to process the fact that something they've been carrying in their heads for months has just become real. Then the sound arrived, not a building roar, a single, simultaneous release from the entire building at once, like a collective exhale from people who didn't realize they'd been holding their breath. The game stopped, officials paused play. A ceremony that had been quietly prepared in advance was set into motion, a public acknowledgement of what had just happened, on the floor where it happened, in front of the people who had watched it happen. Caitlin Clark stood at half court with the composure that defines her in high-pressure moments. Not tearful, not overwhelmed, present. Her teammates surrounded her, the opposing Michigan players stayed on the floor, and here's the detail worth remembering, with expressions that registered the weight of what they were witnessing, not as opponents processing a loss, as athletes in the presence of history. There's a particular kind of generosity in that, and it said something true about what the sport understood it was watching. At the post-game press conference, which stretched well past its allotted time, Clark was characteristically direct. She acknowledged the record, she acknowledged Maravich's legacy with genuine respect, she credited her teammates, her coaches, her family, and then she said something that cut through the noise of the entire preceding year of anticipation. She said she was glad it was done. Not because it had been a burden, but because she was ready to play basketball again without the number following her onto the court. That sentence reveals something true about a competitor. The record was never the point. The game was always the point. The record was simply what happened when someone who cared more about the game than the recognition played it at the highest level consistently for 4 years. But the night wasn't finished, because across the country, on a different coast, someone else was watching. LeBron James does not need to acknowledge women's basketball. That's not a criticism, it's a structural reality of how the sports media ecosystem operates. The NBA exists in its own orbit. Its stars live in a visibility universe that rarely intersects publicly with the college game, the WNBA, or any league operating outside the same advertising revenue and broadcast reach. Athletes at LeBron's level are protective of their public attention. They have to be. Which is exactly why what he did on February 22nd, 2024 mattered as much as it did. LeBron posted publicly about Caitlin Clark's record-breaking performance. He didn't hedge, he didn't offer the qualified, non-committal acknowledgement that public figures sometimes use when they want to recognize something without fully committing to it. He called it for what it was, a historic achievement, and delivered that recognition to an audience numbering in the tens of millions, from a platform that carries more cultural weight in basketball than anything outside the NBA itself. He also said something pointed, that Caitlin is the reason great things are going to happen for the WNBA, not as passive observation, as a direct statement about where her impact was headed. Why does this matter? LeBron James is not simply the best player of his era. He is, by any reasonable measure, the most culturally influential basketball player alive. When he speaks about the sport, people who don't follow basketball closely still listen. When he directs attention towards something, that thing becomes visible to audiences it would not otherwise reach. His acknowledgement translated a women's college basketball milestone into a sports culture moment. Media outlets that had never previously run a Caitlin Clark story ran pieces about the record. Social media algorithms, which reward engagement above all else, pushed the story into feeds that had never encountered her name. Fans who knew who LeBron James was, but had never watched a women's college basketball game, suddenly had a reason to look. Here's the part that deserves honest examination, though. The fact that his acknowledgement generated the level of attention it did is itself a reflection of something complicated about where women's basketball stands, about the gaps in visibility and coverage that still exist, about the reality that a man's recognition of a woman's achievement can function as a legitimizing event rather than simply one athlete acknowledging another. That tension is real, and it's worth naming directly. Clark's record doesn't require LeBron's endorsement to be historically significant. It was significant the moment it happened, but context matters in the actual sports landscape of 2024, and his acknowledgement functioned as a bridge. It brought people to a story they might have otherwise missed entirely. It told an audience that doesn't routinely follow women's college basketball that what was happening at a university in Iowa was worth their attention. LeBron James did not make Caitlin Clark great. She was already great. What he did was serve as a signal, visible to millions, that something historically significant had just occurred. For the people already following Clark's journey, the moment was confirmation. For everyone else, it was an introduction. And in the attention economy, introductions are everything. Records in sport are strange objects. They're simultaneously the most objective measure we have and the most deeply subjective, because what a record means depends entirely on the context you bring to it. Strip away the context and you have digits on a page. Add it back, the years, the players who tried and fell short, the era that produced it, and the number carries a weight no statistic alone can explain. Pete Maravich's record meant different things to different people. To the players who grew up in its shadow, it was a ceiling, the outer boundary of what was achievable in college basketball. To coaches, it was a historical artifact, from an era so removed from the present that serious comparison felt almost academic. To casual fans, it was a number they'd heard of without knowing where it came from or what it cost the man who built it. What Clark's record means is something different, and it starts with the conditions under which she broke it. She didn't break it in the quiet of an overlooked era. She broke it under the most scrutinized conditions women's college basketball has ever produced, with every team she faced spending weeks building defensive schemes specifically around her shooting range, her ball handling, and her passing instincts. Every coach had film. Every defense was prepared. She faced the kind of targeted, sophisticated defensive attention that most individual players never experience, the kind reserved for players whose presence alone changes how an entire game is approached. And she still got there. The generational significance of what Clark did cannot be overstated. Across the country, in school gyms, on driveways, on outdoor courts in every state, young girls who watched the record fall on a television or a phone screen absorbed something that statistics alone cannot measure. They watched someone who grew up in a regular city in Iowa, who didn't recruit by the sport's most prestigious programs, who built her game on repetition and intelligence, and an unusual willingness to work on the parts of the game that scoring-focused players typically ignore, rewrite basketball history in front of the entire country. Role models are not simply people to admire from a distance. They are proof of what is possible. Concrete, verifiable evidence that the thing you are working toward can actually be done. Clark breaking Maravich's record is not abstract inspiration. It is a specific data point, a date, a number, a game that tells every young player with a ball in her hands that the record books are not finished, that the numbers can move, that the ceilings are higher than anyone told you they were. For the people who followed Clark's scoring totals back when the Maravich conversation was still a whisper, through her freshman season under pandemic restrictions, through her sophomore year when the pace first started registering differently, this record belongs to them in a way that's hard to put into words. They were there for the journey. They watched it build game by game in real time, and when the number finally moved, none of them were surprised. That's a specific kind of satisfaction, the quiet fulfillment of having been right about something important long before the rest of the world caught up. The question now isn't whether Clark will continue to make history. The evidence strongly suggests she will. The question is, which nights will carry the weight that February 22nd carried? Which milestones will be significant enough that even the most famous athletes in other sports feel compelled to stop, look up, and acknowledge what they're witnessing? For anyone who has been paying close attention, that answer already feels known. 54 years. One record that every generation of college basketball's greatest scorers looked at and walked away from. It took a player from West Des Moines, Iowa, who never chased the number, who cared more about the game than the milestone, who built her career on consistency under pressure most players never face, to finally move it. 4 seasons of production, one night in front of thousands and millions watching from home. The record belongs to Caitlin Clark now, and everything about her suggests she's just getting started.